Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Guys, what's up? Welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah, and today I wanted to talk about the improper empath. There are probably a lot of you guys listening right now who may label yourself as an empath, but there is some subtext worth mentioning when it comes to that. Because there's something that I've been hearing, and the more I hear it, it low-key frustrates me. And when someone tries to combat me, I'm like, no. We're not playing this game. So by the end of this episode, if you are an empath, if you consider yourself to be that, and I'll explain what an empath is for others who may not know the title but may identify with a lot of the qualities. By the end of this episode, you will understand the importance of being very empathetic when it comes to yourself, okay? If you like what you're listening to, head on over to iTunes, subscribe, comment, rate, review, even follow us on the Bird Brain Podcast. Stay up to date with us. I post questions every now and then, just to be interactive. And you can follow me on TikTok too at Isaiah Frizzell. I like to go there, chat sometimes. But yeah, there are many ways to keep in touch. And there are many ways to listen. We're on Amazon. We're on Spotify. We're on iTunes. And we're also on YouTube. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell anybody who may need that. And I appreciate the people who have been sharing my podcast with their friends and family. That's such an amazing thing to hear. It's like, this podcast is being passed around through families, and that just means healing is being passed around. And that's a beautiful thing. So thank you guys. I appreciate you so much. And I mean that from my heart, my entire heart. And if you want to support the podcast, head on over to Patreon. And what else? Guys, my memory has been terrible lately. And also, if you want to get podcast merch, the link is going to be in the bio of this episode, in the description of this episode. So you can get some merch, t-shirts, hoodies, hoodie season's coming up. And the podcast hoodie is one of my favorites. It's so comfy. But yeah, I think that's about it. So we are going to get into this. If you are home, sit down, get some water, get something to write on, because we're gonna need that. And if you're driving, sit back, enjoy the ride, put on your damn seatbelt. Okay. That's it. Stay tuned. Okay, so at first I was just going to go off the top of my head, but I was right. I should have trusted myself. So empathy and sympathy. There's a definition. Empathy involves putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding why they may have these particular feelings. Sympathy involves understanding from your own perspective. Okay? Sympathy is more of a removed kind of understanding. Empathy is like, I'm sitting down here in the trenches with you. So if you identify yourself as an empath, you may have identified with, you can write these down or count them on your hands. So you usually feel what others are feeling. When something's up with someone. Sometimes you just feel like you feel the world's emotions, or you feel the world's pain. Certain videos trip you up. You're sensitive, essentially, like you're highly sensitive and very in tune, right? if that aligns, you probably at some point in time have identified yourself as an empath. And I've noticed that it's more vocalized in primarily women than men. For the longest time, so I went through this space where I denied being very empathetic. I was like, no, that's not me. Blah, blah, blah. That's gimmicky. And then I leaned into it. I was like, okay, maybe I am. Maybe I am an empath. And now I've removed myself from labeling myself that way because of what I'm going to talk about today. So in recent, the thing I love about TikTok is that it has been giving me an opportunity to have like open discussions. Obviously picking and choosing what you entertain and what you kind of just let be passive. And I've been talking a lot about the importance of boundaries, the importance of self-awareness, the importance of self-value. All these things I've been really kind of driving home. And within that, I've learned a lot, and I've noticed some things. Already I've noticed some things. And it comes down to people saying certain things that really point to, one, of lack of boundaries, two, potentially a high level of codependency, but three, like just a lack of self-awareness to a certain degree in terms of like what they're saying about themselves. So in particular, I think I posted something about like knowing the importance of prioritizing yourself or not feeling guilty for prioritizing yourself. And someone goes, but I'm an empath. I can't help it. It's just my something. It's my gift and a curse to take care of people, yada, yada, yada. And I'm not disregarding what they were saying because I get it. And I've said it before, but looking at it and what they were responding to in terms of what I said, I was like, okay, there needs to be something that needs to be unpacked and or said. And there have been times where people who will probably never listen to this podcast, and that's like insight, but like are quick to tell me in one way or another how I should extend my love, how I should open my heart. And short, and what I'll say with that is never allow someone to tell you how to spend your currency. I talked about currency in the last episode. Your love, your energy, your time, your affection, all those things. That's currency. Don't allow someone who is not depositing anything into your life tell you how you should withdraw, right? So with that, it gets to a point too where I've stopped making it a point to explain myself, because what I've understood is that people only listen from their level of experience or awareness, and people are only understanding from their experiences. And a lot of times people are not looking to understand you. They are looking to be heard, and they are looking to validate their behavior and or experiences. So there's a difference between communication and comprehension. If someone wants to communicate, make sure they have the capacity to comprehend what's being said, right? And make sure they're willing to listen to you. It's like, don't ask me a question if you're not ready to listen to my response. Okay. So the reason why I drive home the importance of self-care, self-worth, self-value as a person that has a high level of empathy is because you will, more often than not, and if you identify yourself as an empath, you could probably attest to this, you will more often than not end up in very imbalanced relationships where you don't know what's yours that you're carrying and what's someone else's. But also, too, you subject yourself to half-assed treatment or very, very, very empty relationships. And your reasoning for that, or let's say our reasoning, is that, well, I'm empathic. I just can't help but care about these people. And I can take it. I could take this hit. I'll be fine. I'll be all right. And you're not all right. Let's be real. It doesn't feel good, and one thing I want to say, and I'll probably revisit this later in the episode, is like, your worth is not tied into how much you can show up and endure without needing anything in return. Your worth is not determined by how low of maintenance you can be in a relationship. Your worth is not determined by how little you ask for help and how little help you need. Okay? You are not some damn furniture piece in somebody else's house. All right? Let's get rid of that narrative. Let's really put that down. If you define yourself as a highly sensitive person, empath, I don't care what it is about time you understand exactly what that means. To say, but I'm an empath, you need to change that narrative, and very quick, okay? It's not, but I'm an empath. It should be, because I am an empath, I need to understand the importance of protecting myself, my peace, my heart, my well-being, my mental health. Because I am a very highly sensitive person, I need to understand the environments that I exist in that affect me on a very deep level. And there is not a solution or usually any kind of reconcile. It's usually me having to lick my own wounds. Let's be real about that, okay? Because saying, but I'm an empath and I can't give up on people, what that does is that allows you to continue to be in this victim space, this victim dynamic, but also very codependent to some degree, where you think you are, because you are needed or because someone knows how to come to you, that you are of value. And if they don't, then that means you're not worth anything. And that's not true. Okay? That is not true by a long shot. Here's the deal. And here's what I've learned. Saying that you can't give up on people, you have to ask yourself, when do these people show up? And I mean that in the sense of like patterns. We all have patterns. A lot of the times when people say, oh, but I can't give up on them, you're not giving up on someone who hasn't really made a point to show up in your space unless they were looking to get something from you. They show up because of what you are giving. You don't want to give up on a person that only shows up to get what you're giving. Okay, does that make sense? And yes, there are relationships that take work. I'm not saying like cut yourself off from every relationship. And if that's what you think, then listen to this episode a few times, okay? Because what I'm saying to you is this: because there's a level of delicacy that you carry just by existing. That level of delicacy probably exists because you've been in unsafe environments or environments where you had to be hyper aware, had to be hyper vigilant, right? So you're delicate. You're feeling out. You're always feeling out. It's kind of like a little kid scanning a room, right? Or a little kid placed in a crowd and they can't find their mom or dad or somebody that they can trust. So they're just always scanning and they're hyper vigilant and they're trying to find a person that feels safe. Okay? That's essentially what sometimes an empath is. And you feel everything, right? You feel a lot. So why would you keep being in spaces where you feel like shit? And you equate that to you being a giver. Giving also needs to have boundaries, because if you give too much, you don't have anything left to give to yourself, or you don't have anything to give back to the relationships that are pouring into you. Sometimes we have to understand how much we are influenced by our relationships, right? It's like, don't steal from Peter to give to Paul. Is that the phrase? My mom says that. I'll ask her. But you guys know what I mean. In other words, taking from yourself essentially to give to someone else, and you don't have what you need for what you actually need it for. Okay? And I was thinking about it and I was sitting on it recently because I think someone said the whole, but I'm an empath thing, or like, what about this? What about, it's like, listen, if you think that it is okay to abandon yourself to be present for someone else, you need to unpack that, because it's taught. It's a learned behavior essentially, right? It's like, you're only as valuable as what you can give. One, but also two, your feelings don't matter. right? And when you're going through things, it's not that big of a deal. You can take care of it on your own. You don't need me for that, but I need you for everything that I go through. Okay? Pay more attention to your relationship dynamics so you can be a little bit more aware of what's yours to carry and what's not, right? And understand, like, sometimes there are relationships where people are just showing up to dump on you because they know you're there. And that's not fair to you. You know, just because I'm dependable does not mean I should be treated like I'm disposable. Okay? Does that make sense? Can we really process that right now? And I know there's probably a lot of women that listen to this podcast. And I know for some reason, it's kind of almost like imprinted, where it's like the goal is to be as, in a weird way, as resilient as possible, but give your all no matter what. And that's your due diligence in life, to just always do that, you know? And essentially you kind of lose yourself, right? You lose what it means to feel your feelings because you're continuously scanning for everybody else and making sure everybody else is good. Now, this is coming from a guy, right? This is coming from a guy. So I do have perspective. And I understand it. I empathize. I actually empathize with that mode of operation. And I think, I don't know what happened this year. Actually, no, I do know what happened this year. But there was a moment of clarity for me where I realized, like, I was doing the most to show up in my relationships, even when I myself was not okay, when I wasn't well. And I could probably count on one hand how many of those relationships were also showing up for me, right? And it just put things into perspective for me. It's like, okay, am I still going to be the same person if I put a lot of this stuff down? Yes. Will those relationships still exist? Well, we now know not necessarily, you know. And it's that thing of, like, sometimes when you're not doing okay, if you are the type of person that's always doing for everyone else, you have a hard time asking for help. And that shouldn't be okay either for you. Ask for help, because if you are willing to give so much of yourself and you're worried about being rejected by others when you ask for what you need, reevaluate those relationships. One. And another thing that like really kind of was interesting for me, where when I've talked to people recently I haven't talked to in a while, and I kind of like updated them on what was going on in life, et cetera, et cetera. They're like, oh man, you should have told me, you should have called me, or you should have said this. It's like, if our relationship only exists as much as I'm willing to do the work and you don't have to do any, then I'm good, because I still have to take care of myself, because you're not necessarily present. You're living your life, and that's fine, well and done. But I don't think people often understand, if your excuse or throwaway is that you always have things going on, then understand people will adjust to that, and they are obligated to adjust to that. You do not owe anybody your full devotion to get their maybe. Okay? Like, you don't have to constantly be there like a statue in someone's life and then they come and pay homage to you whenever they feel like it. Be willing to take up space, one. Be willing to make space, two. And be willing to create a healthier space for yourself. All right? As a person that's very empathetic, you need to understand how much care you actually need because of how much care you're actually willing to give. And I'm being so stern about this because I really want to get rid of that narrative of like, oh, but I'm an empath and I can't give up on people. Fuck all of that. And I say that respectfully because it needs to be clear that boundaries need to be set. A lot of times people who say that just lack boundaries, and you have very high people-pleasing tendencies. You think the only way you can be liked or valued is like, okay, the only way I can be invited to this place is if I'm the one that's going to make sure to clean up and do everything. You know, I talked about my birthday, right? Earlier this year, how like usually most birthdays I would make it a point to bake my own cake because I didn't want to bother other people or whatever, or even when it came to inviting other people. And that sucks. Someone else reached out to me and they told me they felt the same way. And it really broke my heart to read because that's not okay. That's not okay, because the likelihood is those are the same people that probably do what they can to be there for others. And yet and still you have to quote unquote bake your own cake and make your own party. And sometimes you're the only attendee just because you don't want to bother anybody else when it comes to celebrating you. You are not here to just be tolerated, okay? I'll say that again. You are not here just to be tolerated. And you are not only invaluable when you have something to offer in terms of your love and your ear, and your constant will to be loyal no matter what you receive on the other end. There were relationships I said I would never give up on. And then I realized, Isaiah Frizzell, what the hell are you getting? Okay? What is this other person saying about this relationship? How do they treat this relationship? Have they been diligent? Are they willing to pour into the same effort? Likelihood is no. Okay, so what are you doing? You're not giving up on anything because nothing's been given, okay? Nothing's been given. As an empath, as a highly sensitive person, I don't care what it is, you need to change the narrative in your head. Being an empath does not mean being able to endure so many things to the point that you lose yourself and you lack the ability or awareness to distinguish what is yours to carry and what is yours to put down. All right. Your job is to not take on the world and carry it on your shoulders and still lick your own wounds. That is not your place. Okay. You are here to be loved just like you give love. You are here to be valued just like you value others. And anyone who really values you is going to make sure to let you know one way or another that, hey, you need to take care of yourself. Hey, I want to make sure that you're good too. I want to make sure that you're okay. I want to make sure I'm taking care of you. Take a look at your relationships and take a look at moments where you have been in need of help, a friend, an ear. And what were you on the receiving end of? Okay. Was there a lot of ambiguity? Were you going through your contact list about who you could call? Look at the relationships you're usually very much showing up for and how they show up in return. Because I think there is insight into that. There's this quote that says, you can't love someone properly until you love yourself. And I don't think that's true, because it's very possible to love people and not love yourself the way you should. But you cannot receive love properly until you learn to start loving yourself more. Because if you don't know what love feels like, you might be averse to it, right? And you might engage in interactions that feel like love, but in reality are just toxic cycles that you haven't worked through, but you just feel are normal. Get very okay with not being liked to a degree. And what I mean by that is don't run yourself into the ground to make sure that somebody is still going to like you by the end of the day. Because the truth of the matter is, people that love you, they're going to find you. They're going to seek you out. And if you get quiet, they're going to seek you out. They're going to be like, hey, what the hell is going on? Or they might just be present before you even go quiet, because they're constantly checking in on you, right? And like I said, there's a difference between consistency and frequency. Someone reaching out to you when they seem to have a pattern of something that they're going through versus them just making sure that you're good is very different. It's very different. Like there are my friends that I don't see a lot, and sometimes I'll just call them up, check in, see what's up, have a chat, whatever. It could be about literally the air, but we're just checking in, right? We're just doing what we do naturally. That's a relationship. It's natural. It feels natural to pick up the phone. If they needed something, if you needed, you guys are going to be there for each other. That's what you need to understand about relationships as an empath. As sensitive as you are, you need to recognize, your level of sensitivity when it comes to a lot of relationships. Okay. Not, but I'm an empath. Because I am very empathetic, I need to be very empathetic when it comes to myself. Stop letting that part of you that feels like they are going to miss out on something or be left behind. Stop making them the person that delegates your relationships, because you're going to keep ending up in imbalances and somewhat lost in a way in terms of what you should be doing versus what you shouldn't be. Like I said, earlier this year, I went through so much shit and I didn't have the energy to do as much. And it was good for me, because what it did was make me prioritize myself a lot more. But it also allowed some relationships to dissipate because they weren't there unless I was constantly like feeding them. And that's not, and again, coming from a person that's quote unquote an empath, it's like, that's not something that I wear with a badge of honor. In reality, it's just like, dude, you need to take better care of yourself, because when it's all said and done, who's taking care of you? Who's taking care of you? You know, you have to ask yourself these questions. If you're a parent, yes, do the same thing. You do not owe people your all and everything to the point that you have nothing for yourself. You know, think of if you're loving all these things, what currency? Let's say you go out and you buy everything for everyone else. And then when it comes to getting something that you want, you don't have the money for it. You're actually in the negatives. Same thing applies. Like if you're always giving everything to everybody else, and then when it comes to you, you don't even have the energy to take care of yourself. That is not okay. That is not okay. That is not okay. So I'm very passionate about this whole talk around boundaries, empathy, highly sensitive, and people pleasing, because they all kind of do this weird dance. And a lot of times I think people don't realize what they're saying or doing. Being an empath does not mean being a doormat. Okay, so get that out of your head. All right. It is not a badge of honor to show up into relationships where you are being depleted of everything that you have just for the sake of somebody saying that they love you. What do they show? Okay. You are not exempt from being loved and taken care of. I repeat, you are not exempt from being loved and taken care of. Because you are that delicate and sensitive, you deserve to be loved a little bit more, okay? A little bit more, especially by yourself. So get in the habit of being a little bit more mindful, a little bit more intentional about your relationships, and stop showing up to everything that you're invited to. Have some boundaries. Because what your boundaries are going to teach you and others is that, okay, this is not okay. And if somebody can't respect your boundaries, that means they benefited from you not having any. And that's facts. It could be friends, it could be family, it could be children, it could be your significant other. Boundaries are very important. And as a very sensitive person, you need to have boundaries, because you are a kid in some capacities in a crowded room, or in a crowded train station is what I'm picking up in my head. You're standing in the middle of this train station and you just see people moving around you. They're bumping into you. They're knocking you with their bags. And you feel all these things. And you still can't find the person that you're looking for. You can't find the person that you feel safe with. But you're taking all these hits in the meantime, right? So be an empowered empath, not an improper one. All right. And I say this with so much love, because it's very important that we understand how amazing it is to feel, right? How amazing it is to care. Not everybody's capable of doing that. And I've witnessed it, and I'm sure you've witnessed it. Okay. It is something so special about somebody who can just give a damn to no end. But it gets point in time where you have to understand where you matter to. And if there are relationships where you don't feel like you matter, or you're really being taken care of past what you can give, step away, because the truth of the matter is you don't lose out on anything. I promise you. Okay? This is coming from a stranger with a very familiar heart. Okay? I want you guys to take better care of yourselves, and I want you guys to start changing the dialogue that you have in your head and the narrative that you have about being a giver or an empath or an intuitive or etc. Those require more boundaries, because you are more susceptible to a lot. And you've been through a lot. The truth of the matter is, if you're a person that can pick up on other things, you've been through a lot. You've been in a very unsafe environment, and you've had to learn to scan a room. That's what it comes down to. But love and light. Yeah, but in all seriousness, I really wanted to get that out because I think it's so important for you to understand that you are valuable and you are invaluable. And just because you are not okay, that is also okay. Allow people to show up for you. Allow people to take care of you, okay? Again, if you don't love yourself, you won't be able to receive love. You can give it all you want, but you won't be able to receive it properly. Start taking a look at where there's an imbalance in your relationships and how that feels. Start unpacking and being very aware of what's yours and what's not. Start being able to say no. Say no. Something you don't want to do, say no. See what that feels like. And I'm not just talking about saying no to every single thing, but there are certain things you probably say yes first to something you don't really want to do because you don't want to, rustle any feathers, or you don't want to rock the boat. Get in the habit of taking care of you because you are a person too. And your sensitivity should not stop when it comes to you. More than anything, you should be more in tune. You should be so much more in tune. Love yourself the way you are meant to be loved, okay? And it's a lot. You deserve it. Don't argue with me. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves this week, please. And obviously take care of each other with boundaries. More than anything, just value the people in your life that show up without you asking, that are consistent, and that just want to make sure that you're okay. Yeah, do that. I appreciate you guys, okay? And I just want to see you guys well and taking care of yourselves. That's it, and that's all. Take flight.